Good evening, and welcome to the joint meeting of the San Pedro Neighborhood Council Planning and Land Use Committees. Today is March 23rd, 2022. I'm Diana Nave, and I chair the Northwest San Pedro Planning Committee. And my co-hosts here are Javier Gonzalez Camarillo, who chairs the Central Planning Committee, and Robin Rudisil, who chairs the Coastals Committee. I particularly want to welcome tonight, there are several people in attendance from other harbor area neighborhood councils. I see at least 3 people from the other neighborhood councils that are here tonight. If there's any students here who need credit, please raise your hand so I can make sure that we take care of that. I don't think so. So again, welcome, and we're glad that you've joined us. I also want to extend a welcome to Amy Gephard from Council District 15. Amy is the person who's going to be handling planning for the next, what are there, 9 months left? So Amy, did you want to say a couple words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. My name is Amy Gephard. I've actually been with the council office for the past 6.5 years now in the role of communications deputy. And now that Axel is gone, I'm going to be taking on his role as we kind of finish out the year through December 7th when the council member's term ends. I will put my email in the chat. Feel free to send me a note if you have any questions about anything going on. Kind of learning the role a little bit as I go. So if I don't have the answer, I will find it for you as quickly as possible. I know I've already had a conversation, 2 conversations with Diana and more with kind of the leaders of the 3 planning groups just last week. So I'm really looking forward to working with you guys during the next 9 months. And again, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you.
It's amy.gilbert@lacity.org.
Gephard, yes.
Gephard, sorry.
Yeah.
Gephard, got it.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I actually noticed that I had some communication with you, I think back in 2015. It was the old emails.
When I first joined.
I came up with your name. So, okay, well, tonight we have really the whole meeting is dedicated to one item, and that is because we have Matt Gleese, who's the senior LA City planner here, to talk about the planning element of the general plan with particular emphasis on Appendix 4.7 and the plans for upzoning. This plan will have significant impacts on planning in Los Angeles for the next 7 years. And I think there's a lot to cover. We will take questions at the end. So Matt, it's all yours.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Diana, for inviting us. And I think you had invited us earlier. We weren't able to make it. So thanks for being patient with us. It's been a bit of crazy time for us. Still not out of the woods yet, as some of you may know, with the housing element and the compliance from the state. And we'll talk about that. I should say the non-compliance letter that we unfortunately received from Sacramento a few weeks ago. So we can talk more about that. But yeah, I think you wanted to talk about really an important part of the housing element, which is this, it's sort of the centerpiece of it, which is the RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, and then being able to show that you can meet that, and if not, the state requiring cities to do rezoning or upzoning, however you want to call it, to make up for that and ensure that housing goals are met across the state and the region. And certainly the state is getting much more serious about that, and it's become much more than a sort of paper exercise, as some had described it in the past. It's very real, as we're all learning here. So we'll talk more about that in general, but wanted to dip in to the reason you brought me here. And let me share my slides if I can get going here. I'll give a bit of a background about the housing element and how we get to these numbers and how we got here. Some of you may have heard some of this before. Apologize because some of this is sort of housing element 101 a little bit, but I'll try to spend most of the time on what you asked me to come here on those particular rezoning strategies that the housing element put forward zooming in on the neighborhoods in the Harbor and San Pedro area a little bit, and happy to walk you through the table and the maps that sort of explain the rezoning program. So let's get into it. All right, so yeah, so I didn't introduce myself. Matt Gillespie. I oversee the Department of City Planning's Housing Policy Unit. Been here for about 7-8 years now. You know, started 8 years ago with the housing element, and then we thought it was a good idea to stick around and implement the plan, which is sometimes a novel concept. So we did not exist as a unit 8 years ago. Now we're a 6-person team that we're lucky to oversee, and it's the housing element, and then it's like, let's go do and implement not just the rezoning, but you know, 100 plus programs that are part of the housing element, the policy updates. So we'll dip in here. All right, so we recently adopted some couple elements. So it's not just the housing element. Just want to provide a bit of context. We also updated the safety element and made some amendments to our health element. So those were adopted by City Council in November 24th, and just wanted to highlight that was a package. There's some state laws linking these various updates, saying when you're planning for new housing, you should look at safety, you should look at infrastructure, you should look at health and environmental justice. And so we did that, and it was a comprehensive package that we brought to the council in November. Again, the housing element is really about this idea of fair share. All cities in California need to sort of do their fair share, or it sort of falls apart, right? So it's a very convoluted process that's called the RHNA. The Regional Housing Needs Assessment is the way to do that. But beyond that, you know, housing element is sort of the city's big plan around housing, our 8-year plan. So it's a policy document. It identifies all the housing needs and has all kinds of data. Losing my voice already is not good. Might need a drink of water here soon. It's been a long day. But yeah, so it's this, you know, we look at our housing needs, we look at where the barriers are, we look at opportunities to improve on things through policy and programmatic updates. So it's you know, goals, policies, objectives, programs, all those things you typically see in a policy document, as well as the RHNA and the rezoning. And obviously we're all trying to, you know, balance our housing needs in a way that really, you know, obviously production is a big part of it, but also tenant protections and affordable housing preservation are also important parts of that overall balance that the city's trying to achieve. So jumping into the RHNA and the rezoning. So again, this all starts from the state, goes through the regional government, SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments. And the basic idea is that cities have to show that they have enough land that can accommodate your housing need, right? And so it's about identification of adequate sites, and if they have adequate zoning, that's really going to result in the amount of housing units that the state and the region has said that we need as the city of Los Angeles. And this has really gotten more strict and tough from 8 years ago, where now these sites are analyzed very closely, and many other cities, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, Pasadena, got dinged on this part of the process. They did not show enough proof that your sites are realistic. They're really going to turn into housing in the next 8 years, that they have that likelihood. They're actually going to redevelop, that, you know, things are not going to, you know, lease agreements, things like this are not going to pose barriers to redevelopment. We know only so many sites actually turn over. And so that whole process has gotten much stricter, and many other cities got dinged on that. We actually took I think a really great approach, and we're commended for sort of showing the way on this part of it, to really make sure that we're, you know, realistically analyzing our capacity for housing. And then this new component, affirmatively furthering fair housing, AFFH as we've come to call it, that is what we got dinged on. That is also new to the housing element process. And that's all about making sure that we're not just preventing discrimination, but we're also going further proactively, taking meaningful steps to break down walls of segregation, to make more access to opportunity, to bring investments into lower income communities, that we're taking proactive steps through our zoning, through our land use, through our housing programs to meaningfully address discrimination access. So, and you know, we got to ding down a minor component of that I can get into later, but we're here to talk about the RHNA. So here's the numbers, just showing, again, massive increase from 8 years ago, what our numbers were, from 82,000 to 456,000. And the big reason for that is, if you haven't heard, is the state law changed again. to say it's not good enough to just plan for your projections, your births, your migrations, your future growth. You need to look at your existing housing needs that have built up over decades as manifested like things through overcrowding, people paying more than they can for the rent, which and homelessness, obviously the most dramatic result of housing crisis here in Los Angeles. So those factors were all looked at, and probably not a surprise that the Southern California region and LA City in particular do not score well on those really important housing metrics. In fact, we're some of the worst in the country in terms of overcrowding, homelessness, and overpayment. So those certainly increased the numbers this year for us. And those weren't even looked at 8 years ago. So that's where the numbers came from. Certain part of that is low income. And really that means that you have to have high enough densities to support low income affordable housing development. There's a recognition you just can't build affordable housing on low density zoning. So that manifests through a zoning requirement. We took that number. We're recommended by the state to add a buffer. The buffer is because you need to stay above your RHNA for 8 years as sites redevelop and do turn into other things. They turn into office buildings, restaurants. So sites that we thought were housing do not turn into housing. We need to stay above water. And that's why there's a need for a buffer. So we turned that 456,000 into 486,000. It's actually a relatively modest buffer, but that sort of became our target, 486,000. And then, uh-oh. I feel like I'm missing a slide here. Oh no, there we go. Okay. So we go through this exercise to show where do we have capacity, where do we have zoning that can support housing at different densities. We did this whole likelihood of development model through an econometric model. I won't bore you with it, but that's, looking at past production trends, where did housing get developed, what kind of sites turned into housing, and using that to really inform the future. And then there's certain state requirements that come along with this as well, that if you identify these as sites with existing capacity, they become subject to replacement requirements. So any affordable housing needs to be replaced on these sites. Any RSO housing needs to be replaced with any new housing development. And then lower income sites, those sites that have 30 units to an acre, do become eligible for a by right process of 20% are affordable. So this is a state law that does need to happen through an ordinance in the next 3 years for any sites that we called lower income, again, the higher density sites. So just know about that. And we did not put any rent controlled RSO sites on those to not go through a by rights process. There was some concern from community members about putting a target on RSO and allowing for by right on sites that have rent controlled housing already. So. Anyway, so we took the 486, we did this model, here's all our capacity, different inputs, there's pipeline, how much projects are already in our system that are gonna turn into housing, how much ADUs do we have, how much public land, what is HACLA doing, Warner Center was a specific one. We put all that together, we thought 230,000 is what we can reasonably expect over the next 8 years in terms of the number of units. It's still that's well above what we've done, probably about 100,000 units in 8 years, so about double. But that still didn't meet our goal, right? Because our goal was 486. So 486 minus 230 was left us with a rezoning need of 256,000 units. So that's what we are on the hook to rezone for in the next, was 3 years, but now a state law passed, we didn't even know about, that changed it to 1 year if you're found non-compliant. So now we're on a 1 year hook, and I know Diana has questions about that, and we'll talk about that at the end, the timelines and things. So that's a 1 year process now. So this is just showing, just from a fair housing lens, where our current housing capacity is located, sort of unequal, reflects the unequal zoning across our cities. And we really want to take the opportunity to improve this through the rezoning program to make sure all communities in LA are doing their fair share, particularly those with the highest access to jobs, the best schools, the best parks, the best transit opportunities. We want to make sure that there's a fair share there. So that's built into this process, and was top of our mind as we developed this rezoning program. So this is what we're here to talk about, this rezoning program. And you could find this in 3 different places. We have the program described in Chapter 6, Program 121. We have it laid out in a Excel table in Appendix 4.7, all the candidate sites that we had to select that are candidate sites, and we'll get into that. Doesn't mean they're absolutely going to happen, but we had to show candidate sites for rezoning. And then we've mapped those for the public to be able to really understand the many different strategies in the rezoning program, which I'm going to go over here and show them in your neighborhood. So again, more numbers, again, just showing you how the 256 breaks out into income categories. Again, the lower income needs to meet certain density, needs to have 16 units per parcel, 20 units an acre. So we had to keep that in mind as we develop this rezoning. But the overall strategy is an equitable rezoning strategy that kind of has 4 pillars. We want to, again, focus the majority, and this was a commitment that City Council pushed, is that we really want to make sure this is doing a fair share, and we're putting the majority, more than half, of the additional rezoning and capacity in what we call the higher opportunity areas of the city. And this is a term we use a lot in the housing element, refers to this map here, which is a state map called an opportunity area map, where they looked at, again, things that lead to kids succeeding, good schools, good job opportunities, those blue areas that are called high resource. We lumped up the blue and the light blue, high and highest, and call those higher opportunity areas. And again, that's where the majority of the focus is. Not all of it, but we did commit to a majority. We want to make sure we maximize deed restricted affordable housing through this, right? We want to get as much affordable housing community benefits as we can, which requires a thoughtful approach. And that's a pillar. We want to make sure we protect communities that are vulnerable to displacement. We're not just continuing to build housing on areas that already have housing and have rent controlled housing. That doesn't leave us with a whole lot, but that is a priority from this housing element, is to focus on areas that will not result in displacement. Even if there are these replacement policies and tenant protections, nobody being evicted is a good thing. We also want to exclude environmentally sensitive areas. So we completely excluded hillside, very high fire zone areas, as well as sea level rise areas, knowing that's an emerging issue. Just took those off the table when we did this rezoning approach. How is this going to happen? Multitudes of efforts. We're not a small city, we're a big city. We got a lot of things going on the zoning front. One, obviously, is the community plans that are happening. And there's Harbor community plan updates in your area. San Pedro already had its, San Pedro, sorry, already had its, I'm still a little new to LA, so I'm learning, but obviously community planning efforts is how we typically zone and plan for new housing through a community-led effort. So those are ongoing. Those are going to be part of the rezoning program where they're occurring, and in the Harbor area, in the West Side, downtown, Boyle Heights. That's one part. And then there's going to be citywide rezoning efforts. They're going to look kind of citywide criteria. And then there's going to be an update to our affordable housing incentive programs to really make sure we're getting value and getting affordable housing in as we look at adding capacity. So different measures, and then within that, you're going to see many different sub strategies to get us to this number. So I'll go through those. So these strategies led to basically that list, Diana, that you've been asking about, this Appendix 4.7. We sort of put these ideas together and came up with a number of strategies that ended up with this list of potential sites. And I just want to say again, there are way more sites on that list than we need to do. There's actually 1.4 million units of units on this list, knowing that not all of them are appropriate. Not all of them are going to be rezoned, and that we need to go through thoughtful community processes to actually do the rezoning. And so these are in some ways a GIS exercise. That's a terrible thing to say, but a city this big, the time crunch we were under, looking at certain criteria, certain strategies, but frankly, not going down to the street level in Wilmington and saying, does that street make sense? So I just want to say that these are potential candidates, and it's going to need a lot more refinement in further details. So don't take anything on this list as a given. We want to hear feedback on it, and we're going to do the work with communities to make sure they make sense before actually any rezoning happens. This is a little tough to read, but I tried to put this chart, Diana, for you. On this is what you can go see on our website, Appendix 4.7. It's a massive list, again, showing tens of thousands of sites with the potential for rezoning, with individual level details about each of them that the state requires. So you've got, I don't know if we could maybe drill in on your questions, Diana. It sounds like you have some questions, but just wanted to show this is what you could find if you download our Appendix 4.7, all kinds of information about these potential sites, including where they're at, what income categories they're meant for, what their current zoning is, what they're proposed to be, their existing uses, their vacancy, then the densities that they could achieve. So tons of detail in this massive list. And I know it's hard to digest it in a city of our size. So try to help out. We made these maps. So you can go to our housing element website and click on maps, and you'll see maybe a more interactive way to get your mind around this a little bit. And they're sort of broken up into different colors, which respond to these different, we call them rezoning strategies. And at a high level, they're focused on corridors, what we call opportunity corridors, major streets and high opportunity areas. Again, our incentive programs, we have an affordable housing overlay idea, where if you're doing mostly or 100% affordable housing, there's a different set of incentives for you, opening up some new areas for affordable development. Missing middle strategies, which is more low scale, house scale, mid-rise, really low scale, two to three story kind of set of strategies along those lines, ADUs, things like that. There's commercial area strategies that I'll talk about. And then of course the plan updates are kind of their own thing, and they're doing kind of all of these as well on the side through local planning efforts. But I want to walk through them if we have time. So hope it's not too much, but so I want you to understand these. So the opportunities, sorry, we good?
Yes.
All right. So within the opportunity corridors strategy, there's specific types of corridors with different prospective treatments. So we break them up, whether they're a commercial corridor, whether they're a residential corridor, whether they have great transit on them, and sort of, whether they're in opportunity areas. And so these are largely focused on, again, the high opportunity areas of the city, which a good part of your area is not, but some areas of San Pedro on I guess the west side is opportunity areas. So this is where some of these corridors did show up. Western Avenue and a few of these other streets that have that are designated as major boulevards, major avenues in our mobility plan, typically with bus service, although some of these do not, but ones that have bus service get a different treatment than those that don't. And basically, kind of different levels of treatments depending on, again, the intensity of those streets. The most common I think you're seeing here are the OP-RC or the OP-R. These are the ones that are actually the lowest scale. We're just saying 6 units. Again, low scale on those. Those would be, I think most of what you're seeing on this is the OP-RC. You have very few major corridors in that area of the city. So essentially looking at 6-unit potential is the idea here and how it affects your areas there. In terms of incentive programs, we have 2 ideas here. One is to expand the TOC program, which I know is not popular everywhere, but has been a very effective tool to produce 35,000 affordable units, 25% of them affordable, mostly the lowest incomes, extremely low incomes, right where we want growth, which is near our best and highest quality transit. And so there's an idea to expand some of those, again, particularly where you have the great transit and you have the high opportunity areas. And I don't think you have a lot of those combinations in your areas. So I don't think you see that light up at all. There's no blue. It's in other areas of the city, like at the west side. What you do see is this other one called Density Bonus 50. This is a bit complicated to explain, but essentially it'd be moving up the density bonus from a 35% increase in density to a 50%. So it's, basically 11% more than you can get today, I think is what it is. And just the complexity here is that there's actually a state law that said density bonus is now 50% for the entire state. That happened a year or 2 ago. They carved out LA City from that because we had TOC. They said TOC is working great. We don't want to undermine it. In some ways, this is like less affordability than TOC, so we don't want to undermine it. So we got an exemption. Now this is saying, now there's some talk, we've seen some letters from the state saying maybe you're not exempt outside of TOC areas. So this is a strategy to kind of get ahead of the state, make sure that we're not out of compliance, and also allow a little bit more density where you can already do density bonus. So this is not expanding where you could do density bonus. But where you can, now you can qualify for 50% versus a 30%. And there is quite a lot of this in your areas, as you can see there in the olive green. So that's that. And then in our commercial areas, we have a number of strategies. Adaptive reuse. We really want to build on the success of adaptive reuse, which is it's already allowed in many areas of the city. In some areas of the city, it's a very convoluted, multi-year process. Other areas of the city, like downtown, it's a very quick by right process. The basic idea is to expand the quick version of adaptive reuse citywide in buildings that can be reused for housing. So it's just building on the success again and expanding of an existing program into areas like San Pedro that really didn't have, that had the kind of lengthier version of it before, and it has seen some adaptive reuse, but maybe not a whole lot as other areas that it's been easier. We have a strategy about micro units. This came from council a couple of years ago. We never got around to it yet, saying in our regional centers, in those areas of the city where we are planning for the most growth. And I think you've got one in downtown, San Pedro. I think there's one in Wilmington, although Wilmington I think is mostly industrial. And I think your downtown didn't show up because it's sea level rise area. So it didn't show up on the map. But in other regional centers, basically facilitating smaller, more affordable units in those areas, which has to do with density parking and open space. Areas that are already zoned for intensity of multifamily housing. And then we have these things called parking zones, P zones. I don't know if you have many in your area, a lot of them in Wilshire, a lot of them in the Valley. This is zones where you can only build parking. It's a very 1950s, 60s approach. They're often right behind office buildings on, think right behind Wilshire. And they're logical places for housing. They're not, it's banned, it's not allowed today. So this would allow housing in those parking zones. Whereas today you have to go through a zone change. Then on to our missing middle strategies. There's sort of what we call an R2, RD, RDD2, whatever. We should have done, I don't know why we got it backwards. We didn't play with it enough, but this is basically looking at those like low density multifamily zones. I think you have a lot of it, R2, RD, 1.5 in San Pedro. Looking at those areas, light touch, but saying, could we facilitate backyard duplexes? So no tear downs, but really saying, basically, and you can do this today, by the way, through ADU law that has changed to allow ADUs in multifamily, but you're capped at 1 story, which means that folks have to wipe out the backyard parking if they want to do an ADU. This 2-story idea is basically just saying, you could leave the parking on the ground and have a unit above it. So that's really the idea between that strategy is backyard 2-story, whereas today they're limited to 1 story and often result in parking being removed, which we know parking could be an issue in some areas with ADUs. So in some ways a pro parking strategy. We have opportunity ADUs, which again is just saying again are opportunity areas, those areas that have the best schools, that have large lots. Maybe they can facilitate 1 additional ADU in those kind of lots, in those kind of scenarios. And then again, that OP-RC2, which we already talked about, it's a corridor. It's also kind of a missing middle because it's a 6-unit, very low scale strategy. So we lumped it in 2 boxes here. I talked about the overlay, affordable housing overlay. Again, looking at 50 to 100%, so majority, maybe only 100%. We're actually doing a report on this very soon. There'll be a report dropping in response to a Council Member 4 motion asking for more details on this, so stay tuned. Looking particularly at faith-based properties, churches, mosques, synagogues, they want to build affordable housing, often they cannot. So this is saying, allowing them to build contextual affordable housing on their lots if they have room and they want to do so. So faith-based would be rezoned to allow for that, and then public land. Even public land where obviously makes sense to do affordable housing, public has a lot of land. Of course, most of it is not appropriate for housing. Most of it the public city needs, but some excess surplus properties should be able to be more easily developed for affordable housing as a use. Today, it's largely banned and public land in the PF zone. So allowing affordable housing on public land. That's it. So that's the strategies. And then the next steps here, really quick here, just, so we got this letter. Here's the letter. February 22nd saying additional revisions necessary to get full compliance. And this, while not what we wanted to hear, and really, we thought we had a really great housing element from really across the board. Not to toot our own horn, but was surprised, and I think a lot of people were surprised. But honestly, most cities, I think only 6 out of the 188 cities in the SCAG region have compliance. Some cities with the right consultant that said the right things, I guess. But we got dinged on just one issue, really. Many other cities got dinged on 8-9 pages of issues. Our issue, again, had to do with fair housing, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and in particular, not enough specificity on some of our fair housing programs. We basically said there was like 40 fair housing programs that we think contribute to fair housing in different ways. They look at those through a microscope, we're learning, and they really want very clear details and metrics and milestones. We think many of them had them. Maybe some can be improved. So we're going through that exercise, adding metrics and milestones. And then there was a secondary related comment to part of fair housing is making sure you have what's called place-based strategies to encourage community revitalization. And they said you got plenty of great housing strategies that are, preservation, all kinds of things. We want non-housing things. So this was a bit of a shock to us. We didn't know the housing element had to have non-housing things, like all the work the city's doing around transit investments, park investments, sidewalk repairs. Not enough, we know, but certainly the city is doing a lot to focus resources and investments, particularly in lower resource areas of the city. So really reflecting a lot of the work that is happening and it will be happening over the next 8 years, putting that in the housing element. So that's what you'll expect to see with the revision. We've got to take it back through the planning commission. We got to take it back through council. We have to take it back through the state. So consequences, there are some significant consequences. Number one, puts some funding at risk. There's some feedback. We hope, and we've been assured that this should not impact us. These funding rounds are not imminent and we should be able to get in compliance, but there is some significant funding. And certainly that's the biggest concern we and others have about this potential non-compliance, is that funding would be funding for affordable housing, which is what it's all about, would be put at risk. So I've got some acronyms there, but it's a significant chunks of state housing money are now linked to housing element compliance. Also zoning controls. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but there is some interesting language in the law that talks about a builder's remedy for non-compliant housing elements, where it really limits the city and what we can deny. It hasn't been tested in court. Nobody's tried testing it really, but that is in the law. And there's a potential for court-imposed fines for excessive non-compliance, where some private parties can come sue us and ask for damages. Again, we don't think that's likely. We think we're going to come into compliance very quickly. But the big one here is compressed rezoning schedule. Again, we didn't even know about this. This was a bill that was passed September of last year as we were adopting, that changed the penalty for being a little late in your compliance. Again, we're going to get compliance, but not within the time frame that was specified. So now we're on a 1-year rezoning. So what does that mean? So it means, in theory, that by October 2022, this rezoning needs to take place. So that is, the result of this bill from Assemblymember Bloom. Of course, rezoning requires considerable analysis and community outreach, particularly in a city of our size. So we are concerned, and certainly working all the angles to look for a legislative fix for this, to make sure that we're not shortchanging community input and analysis that needs to happen to do this right. So this is a big concern. We're optimistic. We're optimistic the state wants to work with us. We're optimistic there's legislators that want to work with us. But in the meantime, we are putting our nose to the grindstone and getting to work on the technical work that needs to get this going. So obviously I've shown you kind of a plan of sorts, but I've mentioned a lot of details and nuance needs to be figured out with consultation with communities. And so that would be, happening on a more advanced timetable. And so we're going to maybe need to expedite some efforts while still ensuring adequate participation and analysis. It doesn't get shortchanged. I think there's just a commitment that we're not going to do this in the wrong way. We want to do this in the right way. At the same time, we want to make the state happy. So walking a fine line, not going to be easy. Certainly not what we wanted, but that is the boat we're in at this moment. So I think that's it. and be happy to answer any questions. Sorry it was so long and so much, but appreciate your attention. Oh, uh-oh. Okay. I thought I lost you. Okay.
Well, no, thank you very much, Matt. No, that wasn't too long. Actually, I looked at your thing and I thought it's going to take even longer to present all of this because there's so much there. And I'm sure there are questions. I will go to the first one I see, which is Noel Gold.
Hey, Matt, thanks for coming out. Good to see you. I know how much work is going into this. It's kind of crazy, especially with the accelerated timetable. It must have really knocked you guys over. Are you saying, I have a couple of questions, that you need to actually build these 255,000 units by October? Is that what they're requiring, or do you just need to have them planned out?
Planned out. It's a rezoning commitment that we need to rezone to meet a 255,000 unit of capacity. So that housing element is really
it's a zoning issue.
It's a zoning matter. They've started putting
to accommodate it.
Right. They have put production into another law where now you are, for the first time, actually looking at what gets produced and how close you are. And there's a bill called SB 35 that was passed that streamlines some housing if you're falling behind on your production. Mm-hmm. So right now we are behind on our affordable while we're meeting our market from the easier past cycle that was only 82,000.
Yeah.
And that means that we were streamlining today affordable housing projects. They have to do project labor agreements, union labor. So it's not been terribly popular except for, nonprofit developers that already have to do it. There is the possibility with this huge number, 500,000, that we fall behind on our market rate this next cycle. That would mean that projects with 10% affordable housing rather than 50% get streamlined if they commit to doing project labor, if they commit to doing 10%. So that could happen. There could be consequences. I think after year 2 or 3, if we're not hitting our production goals, you could start to see developers say, I want to take advantage of the streamlining. We're going to do the labor, we're going to do the wages, we're going to do the affordable housing in exchange for the streamlining. So that is a thing, won't hit us for a couple of years, but for right now, this 256 is a zoning thing.
How much emphasis is being put on, for instance, shopping centers and things of that nature, where you already have tons of parking built in and you have infrastructure because you've been supporting, shopping centers, which require a large infrastructure, and then building those up, because also you already, in many cases, have transit, for example, built in around shopping centers. There's a lot of things that are already in place. How much emphasis is focusing on those to build those up and build affordable housing and, middle housing and all of that in those areas, and just going up in those areas which are already kind of set up for it? Seems to me that would be like such a great place to start in terms of not having to do so many things. It's already like kind of turnkey, almost ready to go to build there.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And, we may have to cut bait on some of these in the name of expediency and streamline it and get a little more simple. And I think you're absolutely right. These corridors would be one of the first places we would look not to cut. We would want to, I think it is low hanging fruit in a lot of ways. We've heard a lot of support prioritizing those areas. So that is, I think a core strategy, those corridors, those different kind of corridors, particularly ones that have transit, build those up. I think that's a core strategy. And then, I talked about parking zones and adaptive reuse where there are some buildings. So those are all part of the idea of those commercial corridors being utilized as more mixed use kind of.
It seemed like a bit of missed opportunity to not really take advantage of those. And then the one you were talking about, I don't remember exactly the nomenclature, RDD, whatever it was, where it equaled 6. Was that like something that's zoned R1 single family now is 6 units, or is that something else? I didn't understand what you were changing from what into 6.
Yeah, that is saying basically any residentially zoned area would get at least 6. So it could be single family, it could be R2. Again, these are areas that are identified as major corridors. They are in the we're only considering that in the highest opportunity areas of the city, again, for our fair housing obligations. But yes, that could be a single family today, as I'm sure many of you know, is now 4 units for SB 9, right? And
SB 9 and no requirement for affordable housing in SB 9.
There's not. And there is for this. So this is saying you get to 6 only with an affordable component. So thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Okay.
And
yeah.
again,
No,
it may not work on every corner that you see on the map, may not be appropriate for it. So it's a broad-based concept today that needs to be looked at more fine-grained. But that's the idea, from 4 to 6 with affordable.
One more question, because I don't want to be like greedy. Los Angeles, especially in San Pedro, has TOC maps that are not accurate. And we've dealt with this in our planning and land use committees before. They say it's TOC, but it doesn't meet the TOC requirement. And the council office knows this. And so if you're going to be bringing this housing element in where you've got like an extra focus on TOC, you need to change the map so it doesn't say TOC anymore when it isn't, or you need to put the infrastructure and the transportation in there that stays in there so that it qualifies for TOC. One of the things that happens is that a developer comes in and it actually is TOC and it has the frequency that's necessary to qualify. And then they get the entitlement and then they cut the transportation. So now they have permission to build something that's based on the transportation and it's not there anymore. And the other thing that's happening is it just plain isn't there. And there's got a map that says it is. And developers are looking at this map and they're going, okay, TOC, please. And then the city's going, yes, but it was not TOC and it was never TOC. So you got to fix that, because this problem is like gigantic and you're going to be really slamming neighborhoods with all kinds of problems if you don't fix this. And it's like, it's a stroke of a pen that can solve this problem. The fact that it hasn't been solved yet is kind of unconscionable. And I'm not
I think you made
I'm not aiming it at you. I'm just coming to you pleading to please fix it.
No, it's fair. And I'm happy to, dig in with an email to dig in more. I mean, there's a map on ZMIS that is not correct. But we say it right on the bottom. This map is just for reference purposes. I think we're trying to get much better about updating it more frequently. Bus changes every few months. But I think we're trying to make that, but every developer in the city should know you can't rely on the map. You got to go fill out a form with planning. They bring out the exact today's bus schedule today, and they'll make sure it meets it today when you're applying. Now, do bus lines change? They do. This came out of Measure JJJ, and that's one of the challenges with this program. I think Metro will tell us, like, just because we cut it during COVID or because of bus drivers doesn't mean it's not coming back. In fact, if there's housing there, in fact, it's more likely it'll come back. But fair point, it does happen, and I could see the frustration. You thought it had this transit, and now you don't. But I just want to be like, there should not be any the map on ZMIS may be incorrect in some places. And again, we want to fix that, but there should be no projects getting approval or getting, through the door through anything incorrect. We are very vigilant about making sure it has the transit at the time that they apply for it. But I'm happy to, if you want to send an email and we could dive in.
Yeah, it would be great. One final observation. I was looking on ZMIS at some SB9 requirements. And for instance, looking in the dual zone, not just the single jurisdiction zone of the coastal commission. So you've got dual zone coastal, and then you go down to the section that says all answers must be no. And it says, is this in the coastal zone? It goes, no. And so I checked like a whole bunch of properties in the dual zone of the coastal commission for SB9 compliance. And it says no, but it's like dual zone, which is like not even, it's more restrictive than the single zone. So there were a whole bunch. Just look at, Paseo del Mar, for instance, if you want an example on ZMIS, and look at the SB9 requirements.
I'm confused. Again, maybe a follow-up email, because SB9 actually, very interestingly, copied another bill. That one I mentioned, SB 35, for those taking notes. It copied another bill where there's a long list of exemptions in environmentally sensitive areas. Coastal zones are exempt from SB 35. SB 9 took all the rest of the list of exemptions, but not coastal. So coastal is allowed in SB 9. It was deliberately, we think, not included in that list of prohibitions. So there shouldn't be coastal on the SB 9 checklist unless we made an error. But if there is, it sort of doesn't matter, because coastal is fair game for SB 9.
No, excuse me, but there's several other people waiting to speak. So if there's more time, I'll give you time again later. Robin was next, followed by Lou, followed by Dan. So Robin.
Sure. Hi, Matt. My question sort of is a takeoff of what you guys were just talking about. I'm a little confused about what you mean by coastal is fair game. There's been, I've read the Q&A on SB 9, And I've seen some policy letters coming out of the Coastal Commission that talks about certain areas in the coastal zone that I don't think are fair game. But my specific question is, what is the definition of a sea level rise area? Because I saw on one of the maps in your presentation that what I would think is a sea level rise area had a dark blue highest resource area definition or target area. So how do you determine what are the sea level rise areas? You also said downtown San Pedro is one of them.
Yeah, I knew we were going to get technical, and I wish I had my team here because in the weeds. I want to say, looking quickly for that definition of sea level, I want to say it's like, yes, here I found it. 100-year, it's the 100-year sea level rise, and there's a link to it. I can post it in the chat. It's a definition of 100 years flooding, I believe.
Matt, the chat is disabled, so you'll have to email it to me, and then I can send it on to people.
Okay. Yeah. On your second point, Robin, on coastal, thank you for sort of correcting me, because Coastal Act regulations still apply in full effect. Yeah. I was just saying that they're not absolutely prohibited, as they are in some other areas. Like, you just can't even propose an SB 9 in some environmental areas. You can propose them in coastal. The Coastal Commission is still involved, and there's still the coastal development permit. And you're right, they put out a memo that says they are not just going to approve these like it was some other area of the city. They're very worried about coastal access. They're very worried about parking. They're very worried about lot splits on substandard streets. They're worried about areas that flood. So coastal always gets its own rules and will continue to. SB 9 does not trump the Coastal Act. So thank you for clarifying that.
Sure thing. And I have one other question. Is that okay, Diana?
Yeah.
Another quick one. You talked about the non-housing categories, sort of the equity and social justice, perhaps. Does the city get any credit for preventing displacement? In other words, focusing on the people, because we have the replacement policies for affordable housing, which are great, but it doesn't consider the people. And that's a huge concern of mine, especially in the coastal zone. We're just seeing, even when there's replacement of units, people are gone. People are displaced. They don't come back, 3 years later and
Sure.
take the replacement unit. Someone else gets it. And so I wondered if I know in the housing element, we talk about preventing displacement or reducing displacement, but do we get any credit for doing that from the state?
Not in terms of our RENA goals. So there is some tension there, right? They want to produce. But displacement is, a super important part of the fair housing discussion. So the state sort of said you got high marks for your anti-displacement policies, but we don't get credit. We don't get numerical credit for them. But that's an important priority of the city, and hopefully we made some important advances in the housing element. Tenants do have the right to return. I don't know if you guys know about SB 8.
Yeah.
SB 8 does say that every single housing project, whether it's by right, whether it's density bonus, whether it's TOC, every single 2 or more unit housing development needs to replace those units, and the tenant gets the right to return to an affordable unit. Now, that I know that's infeasible often. People move on with their lives, but they do have that option. They are now given that option to move back into that new building. We think that's great. We want to make sure that that expires in a few years. We want to keep that going. That's in the housing element. We want to do more on outreach. How can we facilitate the people moving back? But absolutely. I think any displacement affects somebody's lives, and that's why it's no good. And that's why we're focusing the rezoning in large part in areas that do not have tenants, that do not have a choice in that matter. So that's front of our minds, and thanks for bringing that up.
Oh, is that why you said the RSO buildings? What did you say, that you assign no RSO sites as lower income sites? I wasn't sure exactly what that meant, but
yeah, it's in the weeds. But that basically, it's like, because if you call a site a lower income site, and that has to do with its density, that it's zoned for medium high density, it can be considered low income. It takes care of your low income portion. There's a new state law that says if you call something low income, that the developer could come in through a by right process. They have to do 20% affordable, And some people think it's a good thing, but we heard from a lot of housing advocates that said that's bad for RSO. We don't want to give any more incentive for developers to redevelop rent control properties. So we took a pretty extreme step. We took that out, even though they would have qualified and would have frankly given us some more low income numbers. We did not want to entertain a possibility of basically making it easier to displace people. So that was a commitment we heard and made to try to protect exactly the issue you're talking about.
Excellent. And thank you.
Interesting. The next hand is Lou, not Lou Carvella, but Lou from, what is that, Harbor Gateway?
North.
Hi, Lou. Long time no see.
Hi, Diana. Good evening, everyone. I took a look at Appendix 4.7. It's almost 33,000 pages. I want to know, is there an easy way I can look up the zip codes for Harbor Gateway North and find where we are? I mean, I can't find it with all those pages and they're all in there together. So is there some kind of way I can put the zip code in and all of the ones in that particular zip code will come up so I don't have to try to find it?
I think so. Diana, you probably know, right? Control F. I think you do a Control F search.
Well, we did it, but I don't know how we did it. Maybe Jason can tell you how we did it. We actually, on our website, just so everyone knows, on the Northwest San Pedro website, we have just San Pedro, just the San Pedro section, and we have it sorted by street name. And Jason, maybe you could have a quick answer, and maybe this is something that is more complicated. I don't know.
It's not that complicated.
Control F. Sorry, just Control F should do it, but also the map. I just want to make sure that map goes along with that table. So the map is another way that we've tried to make it easier. We know it's too much to digest, but the map is another tool, hopefully, to help you zero in.
Can you send an email to Diana for Harbor Gateway North? On how to do that, please, so that I will share it with our neighborhood council, because I don't know how many people are here tonight from our neighborhood council.
This is Amy. I can look at it. I'm going to be out for a couple of days, but early next week I can maybe put together a PDF that has a step-by-step screenshots with instructions of how to access it for each neighborhood. But I won't be able to get that to everyone till late next week, but I can do that.
That would be wonderful. Thank you, Amy.
I appreciate it. So am I going to look at your email? You're going to send the email to the neighborhood councils? How am I going to get this information?
It's Lou Watson speaking, correct?
Yes.
Yes, so I have your email. So I will send it to you, and then Diana, I'll send it to you and I'll have you distribute to this group.
Great.
And then I'll check with our deputies for the rest of our neighborhood councils.
I thank you very much.
The next hand was Dan Dixon. Dan?
Thank you, Diana. Matt, my battery is almost dead. So I'm going to ask two questions quickly. And if I disappear, I can get your answer maybe on the recording. One is there coordination with Metro and other transportation authorities to streamline their approval processes and to expand service in a rapid fashion to react to what is happening in the next few years? Because it's traditionally been very difficult to make these things happen. They're as hidebound as the Coliseum Commission. That's number one. Number two, ADUs, do they count in this process? And have you any guess as to how many ADUs might be added in your number of 250,000? And just anything generally you can say about ADUs would be helpful. Thank you, Matt.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, ADUs are a really important part of the housing solution and production. So we were able to get credit, although there's very clear lines from the state about how you get credit. You have to only get credit for basically what you've been doing the last 3 years. So we've been doing a lot. We're the #1 ADU producer probably in the country. And we were able to get credit for that. We were able to get credit for a little, increase as well. but not too much. So we, basically past performance tells us what we can expect the next 8 years. So we claimed all that credit we could. With Metro coordination, absolutely. They are very interested in what we're doing with zoning, and vice versa. We're very interested in what they're doing in transit. So we've set up a lot of coordination with their transit planning teams, talking about these TOC issues, but also just more broadly talking about, they're trying to get ahead of their next gen. So we talk about, their new plan that they rolled out a year ago, next gen, great 10-minute all-day buses. We wanted to be on top of that. We actually referenced that in some of these zoning documents. They want to know, where are these rezonings going to happen? So maybe we'll consider new service in areas where you're adding housing. Vice versa, we want to add housing where they're adding transit. So absolutely, the coordination is really important and is really, I think, stepped up from where it was a few years ago. Obviously, planning housing near transit has been a core thing that the city's been doing for a while. And we've been building out transit like gangbusters in terms of rail. Now I know bus has not been is faring as well, but they've been trying to make advancements. But certainly we are very much doing active planning where they're doing rail for sure, and then also trying to make sure that where they're making major bus improvements that we're on the same page. So, absolutely.
Thank you, Matt.
I think Rosalie Preston was next. Rosalie from Harbor Gateway North.
Yes.
Hi, Rosalie.
Hello. Matt, a couple questions. One is that our Neighborhood Council Planning and Land Use Committee has started a process of identifying lots that we think would be good for construction of apartment buildings, and but of course the developer has to be linked to be willing. One of them is perfect for adaptive reuse. So would we contact you and make sure that those lots are being considered, and maybe also send the list to the council office? That's one question. And then as you know, the Harbor Gateway community plan is being updated, and in our community plan update, there is a proposal for a lot of our industrial lots to rezone them to hybrid industrial, and it can also be hybrid industrial with housing. And we particularly have an industrial lot on Redondo Beach Boulevard at the corner of Vermont that currently a warehouse company, Prologis, has an application in to build a huge warehouse. But that lot is just ideal for an apartment building. Mm-hmm. And also the shopping center next to it. There's a lot of potential there. So it is being proposed in the new community plan to rezone all that to hybrid industrial with housing, but we understand that if the warehouse proposal is approved by the city, possibly later this year, then they'll have the right to go ahead and do that, even though it's not in the best interests of either the community or the need for more housing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think I think work with your community planners. That if you got a plan update going on up there, which you do, that would be your first step, because they're we're not going to step on their toes. Essentially, we don't want to. So they're doing, they've thought about these intersections and know a lot more about it, and working with you guys. So certainly bring it to their attention. Certainly advocate for the project you want on the site. You could certainly send me anything, anybody. I love people telling us, helping us for proactively where they think housing should go. So my email's wide open, but I think if you got a plan update going, that would be my first step is with the planners that you're working with, because they're, send it to me, but they're probably the first in line there to make zoning changes in that area if there's a plan update imminent, as there is.
Okay, Lou Carvella.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you, Matt. I just had a quick question. I don't think you've quite touched on it regarding market rate housing. There was at our candidate forum, a mayoral candidate recently referred to a large amount of available unoccupied market rate housing. And I didn't quite know, and then he kind of moved on. I didn't quite know what to make of that. Is it your perception that that is the case? And what does that mean? And, you know, if that's an ongoing issue, is there some effort to like recategorize or repurpose certain market rate units to be low income?
Now, I don't want to get in trouble with our mayoral candidates. I don't know who said what, but
well, that's why I didn't mention any names, so don't worry about
it. We did not. We obviously looked at vacancy rates. They're very important in terms of looking at our housing market and our housing issues. And you know, we found we have some of the lowest vacancy rates in the country. You know, it's depending on what metric and when you were looking, the absolute lowest, particularly for rental housing. You know, so it fluctuates. During COVID, it went up. People are moving out. That's why we saw rents go down. But you know, generally, I mean, this is a point I try to make often. Vacancy is what we kind of want. Vacancy is what makes the rent go down. Vacancy is what gives tenants power. Vacancy is what you know is the only way we're going to get out of this situation. We cannot build enough dedicated affordable units. We need as many of those as we can. We need as many subsidies. We need as many affordable units, deeply restricted as possible. There's just never going to be enough money. And we need to cover the whole city. We need to cover people who aren't fortunate enough to win the lottery to get an affordable unit. So you know, certain neighborhoods have vacancy issues at times. Downtown had a lot of vacancy because they had a lot of inventory coming online. Rents were going down. In fact, downtown is the only neighborhood where rents have been stable for 5-8 years. So, you know, we think that's evidence that that's a good thing from at least the renter's point of view. There may be some landlords here that may disagree, but from the renter's point of view, you know, the majority of Angelenos. So, you know, what's the right number? I don't, you know, who knows, but the point is, I think we do have a shortage and we've documented, we actually took some pains to kind of look at how many units do we have per adults? Like, do we just have enough units per the number of adults we have? We actually have the fewest number of houses per adults in the country here in Los Angeles region. So we think that's the major driver to this crisis. Obviously, there's many drivers and we need to work on all of them, and preservation and tenant protections need to be better. We need to get every affordable housing dollar we can and milk that. But, you know, market rate housing often nowadays, and I don't know if people realize this is not the case 5-10 years ago, but just about every market rate project includes affordable units nowadays. That's because of largely the linkage fee, which now you have to pay a per square foot fee. Nobody really remembers this, but this was the Garcetti administration win to now every major development needs to provide affordable housing on site or pay a sizable fee. And most folks are doing that on site, which is, I think, what we wanted. So they go hand in hand as well. There's often some people pit them against each other. We don't see it that way. We need both and we need everything. But certainly I don't think we have too much vacancy as a city, as a region. I think we have too little.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple questions, and then Lou, Noel, I see your hand, but I'm going to ask a couple first.
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah, one. I've got a couple of questions I want to ask. One has to do with the process going forward. You talk about community involvement and our, how's it going to happen? What do you see as the actual process that you're going to be undertaking?
Well, it's in flux. We had a plan. We had a 3-year plan, all sorted out. Right. And it's in flux. So, I can't get. And then there's all kinds of proposals being floating around. So we don't know if we're dealing with a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year, because there's just a lot of conversations happening. But I think we are gearing up while we're trying to make these edits and come into compliance. Our team is also trying to gear up and begin to launch this rezoning and sort of, start on the back end and prepare for a public launch that would, go through the typical engagement processes. But I can't give you exact timelines and exact dates, except to say that it's all been sped up remarkably. We're not happy about it. You're right. We're still advocating for a more thorough process, and hopeful that that'll see the light of day.
You're muted, Diana. Or we can't hear you.
No, I'm having a problem. My one computer. Yeah, I'm working from two different computers because one keeps going out on me. So thank you, Noel. My question was to say a little bit, if you could say a little bit more, Matt, about exactly what that engagement process you think will look like.
Well, again, sorry, I know you deserve that answer. It's in flux. And so I can't, right? I mean, there's just a difference between a 3-year process and a compressed process. And, we frankly don't know which one we're in yet. But I think it's just, I'll just be completely honest, right? There's just not as much opportunity in a compressed process, right? So that's what we're trying to figure out. How do we make sure we don't shortchange? How do we make sure we have a very thorough in a city of 4 million people? And then we do the analysis and legwork on the ground and make sure that folks are aware and able to comment meaningfully. That may take different forms than, typical you may have seen, but we are not abandoning the public process or the analysis that's needed. But it may have to look a little different than it would under a 3-year period. And I just don't have much more details I can say than that. That's sort of what my team's working on right now. It's sort of a new timeline and public engagement plan with different scenarios, and it's just not been quite blessed yet. So I apologize, Hannah.
Well, that leads me to my other question, which has to do with how can we help you with the legislative process to make it a 3-year rather than a 1-year. What can we do to help on that?
Contact your assembly person and your state senator. Absolutely. I mean, and we're not alone, right? So I think there are SCAG, right? The region, I think, so 182 out of the 188 cities are in the same boat as the city of LA. And we all frankly didn't even know about it. We weren't able to plan for it. I don't want to get too vindictive here, but I can go into the way that the state is interpreting the law doesn't seem quite right to us, and how we were surprised by the law, and how HCD didn't, frankly, they waited until the last day to give us their answer. They did not contact us. They did not communicate with us. So I don't want to get too, a lot of us cities are not happy. And I think a lot of legislatures are also not happy. And the more they hear from constituents that this is not the way to do a thoughtful planning process in a city of 4 million people, the better. So certainly encourage you to contact, because it will come up for a vote. And we will need the Southern California delegation to support a solution like that. So thank you for asking that. We're certainly looking for help, but we're working our mayor's office very engaged, council office is very engaged, but certainly the citizenry contacting your representatives and letting them hear from you why this is not acceptable is very important.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, hey, thanks for the presentation. You made a comment that you are coordinating with Metro on various transit improvements and projects, and how can we assist in trying to lobby to get the light rail projects which have been slated to come near the area to extend to San Pedro? The Vermont corridor is being studied as far as PCH. South is not being studied as far as San Pedro. Green Line extension, while the 2009 Metro study did look at San Pedro, it has so far only been funded through Torrance. I think we all want to see more housing and more affordable housing. We also want to see the transit that needs to come with it, or we end up in a huge bottleneck quagmire of people trying to get in and out. We only have a few entrance and egress routes from San Pedro, so we need to leverage good mass transit to really enable this stuff. How can we help push on the levers of that?
Yeah, I know you are not the most well served by the transit agency down there. And I'm not a transit expert, but you know, I would just say, you know, Metro has these projects where they're studying corridors, like you mentioned, Vermont and these other things. Just get involved, just sign up for the mailing list, show up at every single meeting they have on those projects, make your voice heard, talk to your state legislatures again, because these often end up in federal, you know, federal funding bills. I'll tell you right now, actually, there's a new process, a regional process that SCAG organizes called the Regional Transportation Plan, RTP, that's kicking off for the next every 4 years. They're just starting that. And that is where these project lists, these regional transit projects do get sorted out. It's a really important process where the region figures out their transit priorities. And so I would think that's a great opportunity that's starting to open up here. If it's not on the current project list, that you want to get on the project list. The project list is what they then send to the feds to fund it. So yeah, I'm not in the weeds, but I think that those are the opportunities I'm aware of, at least.
Thank you.
That was very helpful. Noel.
Thanks, Diana. Thanks again, Matt. Really appreciate you coming out and spending the time. The last question that occurred to me had to do with the Mellow Act ordinance, which seems like maybe it's being worked on again. There's a state law that says you can't convert any residential structure to anything but residential. It has to stay residential. And as you probably know, there's a carve out in the city's Mellow Act ordinance that allows for mixed use conversions as long as the same number of units are replaced. That's a conflict. But in the San Pedro coastal zone, we have 164 RSO units. And this housing element, as you were saying, doesn't even allow any touching of these RSO units. And anything that might be targeted for potential mixed use conversion under the city's proposed Mellow Act ordinance, if that remains in it, would also include RSO units. I mean, so there's a conflict there. How would you deal with that?
Yeah, so yes, so Mellow ordinance is being updated. I think it was released not too long ago and is going through a public process, I believe, currently. I'm looking on our website under proposed plans, proposed regulations, and seeing if it's there. I'm sure it is somewhere here. And who's the right content? I mean, yeah, so let's see what the latest is. They just dropped an ordinance February 2021. Fact sheet, God, it's a year ago already. And then it revised, then went to planning commission. Anyway, so it has not been scheduled for council yet, or maybe it has. Wait, it's gone to Plum.
No.
Sorry, you guys may know more than me, but sorry, I think the best I can do on Mellow is to plug you into that work effort, and that is being led by a planner named Christine Saponara.
Yeah, we know her. No, so RSO is RSO though, right? You just said you can't touch RSOs in the housing element. So if they're in this zone, then they're also untouchable regardless of what any potential Mellow Act would say, right? In other words, the housing element trumps this ordinance, right?
Well, just to be clear, so we it's not that RSO is not touchable. It's that they have enhanced replacement requirements, enhanced tenants protections. We did not target them through the rezoning of 1.4 million potential sites. There are some, however, they're in there, but we tried to stay away from them wherever we could. So I know the Mellow is doing really strong work on rent control. I probably cannot recite all the details. I think that mixed use issue, I think is being addressed in some form or fashion. I can't speak if it meets your concerns. And I think the replacement and the rent control, I think, is stronger in the Mellow than it is anywhere else in the city. But I'm sorry, I don't have all the details, so I just got to hand you off to Christine to dig in more into the details.
Oh, good. Thank you. I appreciate you, Matt. Thanks.
Next hand I see is Keith Pitts.
Matt, I just have a quick question. You mentioned that faith-based owned location. Are they included in that 4.7 appendix?
They are, to the best of our ability. I think we looked at like assessor data to try to find out where the religious owned sites are. That is probably not a full list from the assessor, so it may be incomplete. But I think we did try to. I think you will if you like, for example, go. I think it'll be noticed. You'll be able to find them through an FBO, faith-based organization acronym. Where I believe we've labeled the different parcels according to their strategy. So if they're faith-based, I think they'll say FBO. And you can also see the faith-based mapped out if you look at our map. Each of these strategies is a different color, has a different section. You can see where those are, but this is going to have to turn into a real regulation that is going to have to, not rely on probably assessor data. It's going to be relying on proof that it's actually religiously owned from the applicant, and whether it's on a list or not. So the list may not be comprehensive, but that's the idea, is to allow faith-based organizations to use their land for affordable housing.
Thank you.
I don't see any more hands.
Can you believe it?
No. I'm pausing here just a minute here. Oh, yes, Robin. I just knew it'd be something else.
Last call. I just had one idea for Matt. I believe that the linkage fee doesn't apply in the coastal zone because we have mellow. But because of the way the IAP is consistently interpreted to benefit developers and loopholes are allowed and so forth, the majority of the time, there's no affordable housing replaced or provided. And I'm thinking maybe the linkage fee should be applied in the coastal zone in the cases where there is no affordable housing provided, as a result of mellow requirements. It seems like the coastal zone is getting a bit of a loophole in that regard. So maybe something to propose.
I don't think there's any exemption in coastal. There is I'm looking now, it is called an exemption, but it's not, there is an exemption for if you are in the coastal and you're doing more affordable housing, or you're paying a greater fee than you would have had to do under linkage. So you're doing more. If you're doing more than the linkage fee would have required, then you're exempt. But it's not an exemption writ large for the coastal zone. They got to do more to get out of it. Yeah.
I've never heard of anybody paying it, but anyway, I'll look into it.
It's it kind of was a slow burn because it's phased in, and a lot of projects, they've been gestulating for a while, and so they may have been either exempt or they had to pay a rather minimal because we kind of phased it in over a period of time. So, but new projects coming in the door now should absolutely pay the fee, and you should ask them about it. I mean, we're actually looking at the data because we're wondering, is everyone really paying the fee? Is building and safety doing this right? So we're digging into that, rest assured, to make sure nobody's being missed by accident. We don't think so. We're up to $91 million we've raised so far, and we expect that to increase markedly as more projects come into the fold.
Well, that's great. We'll keep an eye out.
Okay. This is last call again. Seeing no more hands, I want to thank you a lot, Matt, for coming down and giving us this, taking your time to discuss all of this with you. And, feel free to contact us about support for working with our legislators on getting that extension. And we will look forward to knowing how we're going to proceed in terms of the community input.
Great. It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys so much for your involvement, your effort, your interest, and for inviting us out, and happy to do it anytime. So yeah, talk soon, and feel free. My email box is always open for housing questions. So we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Thanks again, Matt.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye. I like the way Jason's face has merged into the front of the red car.
Isn't that weird? It's like headless there for a few minutes.
Like the little engine that could.
Diana, I just wanted to let you know I have to hop off as well, but thank you everyone for so much for having me, and I look forward to working with you.
Thanks, Amy.
Hey, thanks for being here, Amy. Yeah, I think it's probably each of the three neighborhood councils probably ought to start looking at the map and what's identified in our specific areas, so we begin to get a feel for what might be happening, and
indeed
saying where we are willing to have it and where we're not willing to have more development. That gets us to the next item, which is the updates. And I have a few, and I don't know if Robin has any, but my updates are, first of all, at the YWCA. You may recall that the YWCA came with a project for, what's the word I want, wraparound services and housing for women and children. Seems like it's probably more than 2 years ago, because it was when we were still meeting live. And they just got $2 million in funding for this project through the budget process. So that looks like that project will probably move forward. We'll probably want to have them come back and talk to us more about it now that it's looking more realistic. Target, for those of you, particularly the Stampede, for those Northwest people, we understand that Target is reworking their plans. We don't know what that means. Hopefully it means they've heard our concerns and are looking at moving it within the Target parking lot, but we will see. 345 Miraflores, so the entrance there, right behind the animal shelter, that lot is being advertised for sale, and it's being advertised as a self-storage facility. It actually isn't approved yet to be a self-storage facility. They haven't even filed the paperwork with the city, but that's how they're advertising it. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And the Auto Palace on 5th Street is also looking at converting their ground floor to a self-storage facility. All of a sudden, everybody's interested in self-storage.
To meet the demand of the ADUs, probably.
Yeah, West Harbor is anticipating groundbreaking sometime in April or May. And the big one is the Best Western on Gaffey. That, I've been watching that for a while. I don't know about anyone else because it was obviously not working as a hotel and wondering what's going on. The county has submitted to the state an application for project home key funds that would result in the conversion of it to an interim housing for the homeless. And the Volunteers of America would be the operator and developer.
Which hotel was this again?
Best Western. That's sort of by like First Street.
First and Gaffey? Mm-hmm. It was a Holiday Inn and then it was the First Western. Yeah. Been
Best Western for a long time now, yeah.
Okay.
It's not been operating as a hotel for a while. It doesn't appear to be. The application is currently under review by the state, so they don't know for sure whether or not the state will accept the application for the funding. If indeed it does get accepted, then the current property owner would be selling the property to BOA, and then BOA would be operating it, but under some kind of oversight from the county, which I'm not quite sure what that means. So what'll happen if they do get approved for the funding for it, then probably in May, June, July, sometime in there, we'll come back, talk to us about what the actual proposal is before we move. That's what's happening there. So that's the end of my updates. Robin, did you have anything?
I do not have anything today.
Okay, and I think that Javier is gone, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that gives us a comment. Oops,
on the note of the updates, Diana, I did update the the Google map with those latest that you sent to me.
And I'm having some, Jason, that's why I called you. I'm having some trouble with the map, with the spreadsheet. So I still need to talk to you about it.
Okay.
Cheryl Ackerblom.
I'm not sure if this is the correct place to ask erroneous questions about projects around town.
No, this is a good place.
Okay, good. Two things. One, can somebody tell me, Adele, maybe, I see your name on the last agenda for the 676 38th Street. Is that the blue house at the corner that they're trying to convert into a triplex? Because they took all the address markings off of the building.
You know, we have a couple on 38th Street.
Oh, I'm getting there, just one at a time.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm not aware of anything being converted. Was it a single family home into a triplex?
It's a duplex.
Oh, it's a duplex now? I don't know.
It was a duplex, and you can already see they've got 3 front doors on it.
Robin, does that address sound familiar? It doesn't sound familiar to me.
That's okay. I can look it up on Google Maps. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But my bigger concern actually is my immediate neighbor wants to build an ADU, and I'm ecstatic for them, but they're not going to include any parking. And I'm not ecstatic about that. And I'm also upset because I was at the hearing and they said, oh yes, they did outreach. Excuse me, they did no outreach. I just happened to read the notice. So I want to, I'm gonna make a submission, but I want to be clear, Robin, before I'm mad now, which is a bad thing. Before I make that correspondence, they said in the hearing that they had gone to the neighborhood council. My understanding from your emails is they talked to you, end of story, one person, and it obviously never came before the committee or the council. I just want to cross my I's and dot my T's.
Which address, Cheryl?
Oh, I'm sorry. She knows. It's 582 38th Street.
Yeah, we discuss everything as a committee, and only the committee can decide not to hear something, not just me.
Right. Well,
and Adele has done research on every one of them. She's been our ADU specialist.
Yay. Yeah, because they're also telling me that they're not planning to rent it out, which is fine for today, but they have 3 kids who are going to be driving in a few years. I could go on, but I won't. But it was never agendized in the sense of brought to a the neighborhood council committee, and it was never clearly brought to the full board. I'm just checking.
Well, is I don't know, Noel, is that the gal that was on the? I
think that's Anna. Aaron.
Yes, it is.
It's Anna. Hers. Oh, okay. All right. Well,
and Mark.
And they're clearly not using the garage or the driveway now, but they certainly could use the driveway and the garage, and they could also have entrance from the back alley. It looks like from that gate. They don't.
That's my objection. But that's my objection, because they say, oh, we can park 2 cars in our driveway. They can barely get their tiny little compact in the driveway because they've got a fountain and they've blocked it off permanently. Yeah. And by the way, yes, they have a 2-car garage that they don't use for parking, which is fine, but they're going to tear down the garage to build the ADU with no parking.
I don't know that that's correct.
It has to be. I live next door, trust me.
Well, that was not in the plans, and I talked to the architect about it and the design, and that is not in the plans.
I'm going to be real curious to see how they manage that. But okay, I'll carry on my own. I just wanted to get some input before I go off, because I'm going to.
Cheryl,
so thank you.
Cheryl, I'm happy to put it back on our agenda if there's community concern. I think
it's too late. They've already had the hearing. They're going to rubber stamp it. It's fine, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to also have my say. I know it won't make any difference.
It's not too late. It's appealable.
Oh, it's not that. I'm not going to go to that extreme. I mean, I love my neighbors, but I'm just annoyed. So it's all good. Thank you.
Isn't something like that by right? And also ADUs don't require parking.
Exactly. Yes.
Except that every other ADU on our block has it.
Nothing is by right in the coastal zone.
It's fine. I mean, like
there is parking available if they choose to use it. Now, maybe the next buyer of the home, if they ever sell the home, they would use the ADU as a rental and they would, you know, redo the driveway so that they could park in the back.
Okay,
And then the sign in the front saying, no, don't block my driveway.
Right.
You know, that's
know.
a very minor, that they could put a tiny car in there.
They do.
Right?
They park their EV car,
well,
and
that's their reserved spot.
But they park their other car on the street, and the parking's already, it's pleasant, actually. I can't complain, but there's the house next to them that's been vacant for 20 years that's about to get a family. You know, the parking's about to get ugly is my point, and that's why I'm concerned. And that's today, you know, that's in the next 6 months to a year, let alone 5 years from now if they sell and the new owners decide to rent.
Right.
So I have my panties in a bunch about it, but you know, it is what it is.
Okay, let's move on to public comment then. Comment items not on the agenda. James, Kim.
Okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow. No, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Hi, you're in public comment, Diana? I just have a general question for the board here. Do you think joint planning should be involved in locations for homeless encampments, which the councilman doesn't want, and the homeless committees are too political about the whole thing? And
we basically left that for the homeless committees because we have so many other things on our plate.
yeah, okay, thank you. I just checking. Thanks.
Any other public comment? Okay. The seeing none. The next is
you're muted again, Diana. Sorry.
You got both computers.
Poor thing. Yeah, as soon as she mutes one, the other one cuts out. She can't win.
Uh-oh, she's coming in here.
Throw the other computer away.
Yeah. She's coming in to where I am. Here she is.
Okay.
Usually Pat's the one having the problem.
Oh, I'm having a terrible time tonight, and I couldn't just go off and come back on because I'm the host. So I don't know what my problem is. Anyway, so yeah, I kept going back and forth between two computers. So the next meeting, the main agenda item is going to be the specific plan for Rancho San Pedro. And that was really all I had to say.
Well, that's going to take some time. That'll be involved.
Yeah, that'll be a major item. So anything else for the good of the group before we all say goodnight?
Dinner.
Huh?
Dinner.
Is your hand up again, Cheryl, or is that from before?
Sorry, it must be from before. My bad. Here, let me put it down.
Thank you, Diana. That was a great session. Thanks for getting
very helpful. Thanks for
that was a great presentation.
Roping Matt in. It might be his last time, but you know. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us, Diana.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad you could come. What's all this? I see some hands. Wait a second. Was that it, Lou? Okay. Okay, good night all.
Good night.
Good night.